I woke up to the faint blue light from my phone blowing on the nightstand. Half asleep, I figured it was just another spam alert, but the buzzing wouldn't stop. Still groggy, I reached over and squinted at the screen, trying to make sense of the flood of messages from my banking app. 10, 11, 12 separate transactions. All between 3:07 and 3:28 a.m. At first, my tired brain couldn't piece together what I was seeing. $1,200 spent on a flight, $2,800 at some luxury boutique in Tokyo, $3,100 at a jewelry store I'd never even heard of. Then a handful of smaller charges, if you can call $600 small, at random restaurants and gift shops. My stomach dropped so hard it made me dizzy. I shot upright, fully awake now, the shock hitting me like a splash of freezing water. I yanked open my desk drawer to grab my wallet, empty. The slot where my credit card should have been was bare. I lived with family, not strangers. My younger sister Lena had been visiting for what was supposed to be a couple of weeks but had quietly stretched into 2 months. She claimed she was between jobs and just needed somewhere to crash. I'd been covering her groceries, utilities, even her Uber rides, because apparently, public transport gave her anxiety. And now my card was gone. I stumbled down the hallway, heart pounding so hard it felt like my ribs were shaking. Her door was shut, and the only sound coming from inside was the faint hum of her phone charger. I knocked once. Twice. Nothing. I eased the door open just enough to peek inside. No Lena, just an empty bed. The kitchen was dark. The bathroom was empty. The front door hung slightly open. By sunrise, I had my answer. Lena's Instagram story, timestamped 4:02 a.m., showed her grinning at the airport next to our cousin Maya. Both of them held up boarding passes. The caption read, "First class to Tokyo, baby. Life's too short, make it luxurious." My jaw clenched so tight it actually hurt. By lunchtime, the bank confirmed what I already feared, the total was just over $11,000. I froze my card, filed a fraud report, and did my best to stay calm. But underneath it all, there was this deep, burning anger. Not only at Lena for doing it, but at the fact that I already knew exactly how this would play out once she came home. And sure enough, I was right. A week later, she walked through my front door like she'd just come back from a weekend getaway. 2 enormous designer suitcases rolled behind her, and Maya was nowhere to be seen. She'd apparently decided to stay in Kyoto. Lena smelled like duty-free champagne and expensive perfume, her face glowing like she'd just stepped out of a spa. Before I could even get a word out, Dad showed up to pick her up. He stepped between us, giving me that classic disappointed father look. Then came the lecture. He said I needed to stop being dramatic. Lena would never steal from me, and I'd always been paranoid about her. I didn't argue. I just smiled, because the card she used had my name printed right across it. To understand why my sister thought it was fine to swipe my card in the middle of the night, you'd have to know how things have always been in my family. Lena has been the untouchable princess since the day she was born. And I mean literally untouchable. Whatever she wanted, she got, no matter how selfish, impulsive, or reckless. If anyone dared to call her out, she'd crumble into this fragile, misunderstood soul who couldn't handle negativity. Meanwhile, I was the responsible one. The straight-A student who got a job at 16 to pay for my own phone bill. The one who never caused problems because I knew any trouble would somehow end up being my fault. Dad used to call me dependable. Sounds nice, right? But what it really meant was, we can take from you, and you won't complain. By 23, I had a good IT job in my own 2-bedroom apartment. Lena, 21 at the time, was on her 3rd attempt at finding a career path. She spent 6 months in community college before deciding she needed a break to find herself. Then came cosmetology school, which she quit because she said beauty was too shallow. After that, a short-lived cafe job that ended because her manager didn't appreciate her enthusiasm. Guess who covered her rent whenever she was between jobs? Guess who stocked her fridge when she said her paycheck was late? Guess who co-signed her last credit card because the bank was unfair to her? Yeah, me. And the funny thing? She never saw any of it as generosity. To her, it was just what family did, which somehow only seemed to apply when she needed something. About 2 months before the Tokyo stunt, Lena called me sobbing one night after a fight with her roommate. She needed a place to stay for a few days. I told her fine, I had a spare room. Against my better judgment, I convinced myself it would be temporary. But a few days turned into a week. Then 2. Soon she was calling my place our apartment. The moment I watched her drink the last of my oat milk straight from the carton without asking, I knew I'd messed up. The real red flag came when packages started showing up under her name, designer makeup, high-end sneakers, stuff I knew she couldn't afford. When I asked how she was paying for it, she just laughed and said not to worry about it. Which, in Lena speak, meant she was either maxing out another credit card or running up a bill she'd eventually expect me to clean up. The night before she stole my card, we barely spoke. I was buried in a late work project, trying to meet a deadline. Around midnight, I finally shut my laptop and went to bed. She was still awake, sprawled out on the couch, FaceTiming with Maya and scrolling through Instagram like she didn't have a care in the world. Maya, our cousin, is basically Lena's partner in crime. She's the kind of person who leans on others, expects help, and never owns up when things go wrong. Put that attitude together with Lena's habits and you get a recipe for bad decisions. I'd overheard snippets of their FaceTime that night about getting away and living it up. I wrote it off as their usual fantasy talk. The truth was, Lena had less than $100 to her name and was literally borrowing cash from me to cover her phone bill last month. Then, around 3 in the morning while I was asleep in my own bed, she quietly came into my room, slid open the desk drawer, and took my wallet. She swiped my credit card like it was nothing. Later, the hallway security footage confirmed what I suspected, her tiptoeing out with a suitcase, meeting Maya downstairs, and heading straight for the rideshare that took them to the airport. When Dad told me to stop acting like Lena would ever touch my money, it wasn't ignorance on his part. It was a pattern he'd reinforced for years. At 19, Lena totaled his old car while texting and driving. His response was to be grateful she survived and then buy her a newer vehicle to replace the bad memories. When she blew $4,000 on a week in Miami, his answer was some version of, "You can't put a price on life experiences." When she lost a retail job for skipping shifts, he took her out to lunch to make her feel better. Me? When I overdrew my student account by $40 because a paycheck was late, Dad gave me a 20-minute lecture about responsibility in being an adult. So there I was, Dad glaring at me, Lena smirking behind him, and I realized it was pointless to argue. I had the bank records, timestamps, and the Instagram posts, none of it would matter to him. In his eyes, Lena couldn't possibly be guilty. I was the nervous older sibling who needed to learn to let things go. What nobody else in the house knew, though, was what kind of card she stole. It wasn't a personal card, it was a business card linked to my IT consulting side hustle, something I'd quietly been building for the last 2 years. That card had tracking and security features Lena couldn't even imagine. The moment she tapped it for those first-class tickets, my system pinged me. Not just the bank, my own monitoring setup logged every purchase, geotagged every transaction, and pulled merchant info that left no room for doubt. In short, I already had everything I needed. And I wasn't just going to try to claw my money back, I planned to make sure no one in that family could pull this stunt again. A week after Lena came back from Japan, tension thickened the air in my apartment. She didn't apologize or explain. She acted like she'd been on a quick weekend trip, not a two-country, first-class spree paid for with unauthorized charges. Dad still defended her, dropping by every few days to check on her, which really meant glaring at me for being distant with my poor little girl. That Friday, I decided I'd had enough. I was done being the one everyone turned to when money ran out. I was tired of swallowing my anger while Lena and Maya lived like tourists on other people's cards. I was finished with Dad's blind indulgence. So I set a trap, simple and domestic. I told them I'd ordered takeout, Lena's favorite sushi, the outrageously priced kind that makes you wonder how raw fish can cost that much. I said we needed to talk and invited Dad to join. They both showed up on time, Lena in a silk robe and the $900 slippers she'd bought in Ginza, Tokyo, and Dad in his usual jeans and polo, already wearing that look of disapproval. We circled the dining table with steaming containers between us. I waited for a beat, leaned back in my chair, and asked, calm as I could, "So, what about the $11,000 you charged to my business card?" Lena rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might fall out. "Oh my God, you're still on that," she scoffed. "I told you I didn't touch your money. Stop making up stories." Dad cut in right away. "Enough, Ethan. We're not going to do this." I smiled. "Perfect. We won't entertain it. We're going to prove it." I pulled my laptop from under the table. I'd already scheduled a full report from my card tracking system, merchant names, timestamps, and even CCTV stills that vendors had cooperated with once I framed it as an inquiry into fraud. The first image I pulled up showed Lena and Maya in the LAX first-class lounge, champagne flutes raised and boarding passes on display, timestamp 3:58 a.m. Dad stopped mid-bite. Lena's chopsticks hit the plate. Next slide, Lena charging purchases at Haneda's duty-free, arms full of luxury bags, 5:12 p.m. Japan time. Next, the purchase of the $900 slippers she was wearing. "You want me to keep going?" I asked, voice steady but loud enough to make them sit up. Dad started to open his mouth, but I cut him off. "You told me to stop pretending all week, so let's get everything out in the open." I didn't just freeze the card. I'd already filed a formal report for the unauthorized charges. The bank had reversed the transactions, and the police had their copy. When Lena realized what that meant, her face drained of color. "You called the cops," she whispered, like she couldn't believe it. I didn't raise my voice. "You made purchases under my name, on a business account, without permission. That's not a family disagreement, Lena, that's a crime. And you didn't just take my money, you put my entire business at risk. Dad slammed his palm on the table so hard that the plates rattled. Ethan, enough. This is family business. We don't involve the police in family matters. I laughed, short, sharp, bitter. Family? You mean the same family that spent years using me like a safety net while making excuses for every one of her screw-ups? The same family that called me paranoid when I showed proof? Lena's confidence cracked right then. I can pay you back, she mumbled, her voice shaking. I leaned in. No, you can't. You don't have 11 grand, and you never will if you keep living like this. Which is why you're packing your things tonight. You're leaving my apartment. And you, I said, turning to Dad, can stay gone until you admit what she did and apologize for taking her side. Dad's jaw clenched. You're making a mistake. She's your sister. I stood up, my patience gone. She's not a child anymore, Dad. She's an adult who's been protected from consequences her entire life because you never let her face them. Well, that ends right now. I slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a printed copy of the police report, the case number from the bank's fraud investigation, and every transaction she'd made. If you think I'm bluffing, I said, call the detective listed at the bottom. He's expecting your call. Lena's hands trembled as she pushed back from the table. You're ruining my life. I moved aside and pointed toward the door. No, Lena. I'm finally making sure you stop ruining mine. She stormed off to the guest room to pack. Dad stayed frozen for a moment, staring at the envelope like it might explode. Then he muttered something about me being heartless and followed her out. When the door finally shut behind them, I just stood there. The silence felt heavy, but it wasn't painful. For the first time in years, I felt free. In control. Like I finally had my own life back. The next 24 hours were chaos. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Lena started with texts, "You're overreacting. You've always been jealous of me. You'll regret this." When that didn't work, she moved to voice messages, crying, yelling, trying to guilt me into sympathy. You turned everyone against me. Dad's devastated. He hasn't eaten all day. Good, I thought. Maybe now he knows what it feels like when someone stops cleaning up after him. By morning, Dad was calling nonstop. I ignored every attempt. Then came the message from Mom, soft voice full of guilt. Can't you just drop the charges? It's tearing us apart. She's your only sister. I wanted to scream. I've been supporting her, I muttered under my breath. My whole damn life. 2 days later, the real consequences started. Detective Harris from the Financial Crimes Division called to confirm that Lena had officially been contacted. She had two options: repay the full amount and sign an admission of guilt, or face criminal charges. I braced myself for the usual storm of tears and apologies. But there was nothing, just silence. Which honestly felt worse. It meant she was plotting. Sure enough, Maya called the next morning. She never reached out unless she needed something. Ethan, she began, trying to sound light, Lena's terrified. If she's charged, she'll never work again. I let her talk for a bit, then cut in. Maybe she should have thought of that before committing fraud. And Maya? If I were you, I'd take down that Tokyo photo dump before the police start wondering how you paid for your ticket. The call went dead instantly. That afternoon, Mom showed up unannounced. She didn't knock. She just walked in like she still had that right. Her first words weren't "Hi" or "Can we talk," but "They're staying at a motel." It's awful, Ethan. You've humiliated your sister. I leaned against the counter and looked at her, really looked at her. Humiliated? No, Mom. I corrected the situation. She shook her head, voice trembling with that familiar tone, guilt dressed as disappointment. You could have handled this quietly. Family problems shouldn't be public. They're only public, I said, because Lena spent $11,000 in public stores with my stolen card. She wanted to live like royalty, now she gets to face reality. Mom's expression hardened. Your father thinks you've gone too far. I gave her a calm smile. Then he can think that from somewhere else. He's not welcome here until he admits he was wrong. And if he keeps trying to interfere with the investigation, he'll end up explaining why he's defending a suspect. That finally shut her up. Within a week, the family had split right down the middle. On one side, Dad, Mom, and the cousins who always worshipped Lena. They called me cold, vindictive, ungrateful. The brother who betrayed his sister. On the other side of the family, there were a few people who quietly reached out to me, the ones who'd been watching this dynamic for years without saying anything. My aunt, uncle, and a handful of cousins sent messages saying they were proud of me for finally standing my ground. Uncle David said it best: we all knew Lena was out of control. Nobody wanted to be the one to call it out. 2 weeks later came the real surprise. Lena showed up at my building. Not to apologize, but to make a deal. She looked different this time. Smaller somehow. She wore plain sweatpants and an oversized hoodie, no designer logos, no perfume, no confidence. They said they'll drop everything if I pay you back in 6 months, she muttered, avoiding my eyes. But I need you to tell them you're okay with it. I didn't even think about it. You can send the payments through my lawyer, I said. I'm not signing off on anything or softening the report. You do it by the book, or you deal with the consequences. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes filled with tears. You're really done with me, aren't you? I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Lena, I was done with you the night you took my card. Everything since then? That's just paperwork. She didn't respond. She just turned around and left without another word. 3 months later, it was over. She somehow managed to scrape together the money, signed the admission of guilt, and closed the case. Her record now carried the mark of what she'd done. Dad hasn't met my eye since. My own life, though, became still, finally quiet. Peaceful in a way I hadn't known in years. Not just financially, but emotionally. No more late-night knocks. No more just this once loans. No more tension in my own home. For the first time in my adult life, my money, my home, and my peace belong entirely to me. It's been 6 months since the night I slid that police report across the table. Lena hasn't come back. Dad still sends the occasional guilt-ridden text, "Hope you're proud of yourself." And honestly, I am. For once, I'm not living in crisis mode. I'm not bracing for someone else's mistake. I'm not budgeting for someone else's irresponsibility. Most importantly, I don't feel guilty for putting myself first anymore. When I look back, it's almost ridiculous how long I let that pattern continue. Years of convincing myself it was easier to pay up than argue. Telling myself family means helping, even when it costs you peace of mind. But here's what I finally learned: if you don't draw a line, people will keep moving it. They won't stop because you've been kind, they'll stop when you finally make it inconvenient to take advantage of you. And the moment you say no, they'll call you selfish, not because you hurt them, but because you stopped serving them. A few weeks ago, I ran into Maya at the grocery store. She froze like she'd seen a ghost. I smiled, said hey, and kept walking. She probably thought I'd ask about Lena, but I didn't, because I didn't care. From what I've heard, Lena's record keeps her from certain jobs now. She still posts on Instagram, but the vibe's changed. Gone are the luxury lounges and Tokyo boutiques. Now it's thrift store outfits, boxed wine, and captions about new beginnings. But I know the truth. That's not a rebirth. That's reality catching up. I don't feel happy about it, but I don't feel sorry either. Actions have consequences. And for once, they found their rightful owner. A few nights ago, I was sitting on my couch, laptop open, finalizing a contract for a big new client. My phone buzzed with an email from the bank, a $7,800 transfer. The last installment from Lena. I stared at the number for a moment, then laughed quietly. Not because I needed the money, I'm doing better than ever, but because it felt symbolic. That payment wasn't closure for her. It was closure for me. It was the final nail in the coffin of the person I used to be, the one who confused love with rescue, generosity with obligation, and boundaries with betrayal. The version of me who thought being good meant giving until I broke. That version's gone. Now, I keep my doors locked, my bank alerts on, and my boundaries ironclad. My space, financial, emotional, and physical, belongs entirely to me. I've stopped justifying my choices to people who are only angry because they can't profit from them anymore. And if Dad, Lena, or anyone from that side of the family ever tries to test me again, I won't need proof, or a report, or evidence. All it'll take is one word. No. Because I've learned the simplest, strongest truth there is. I'm not their safety net. I'm not their backup plan. I'm not their last resort. And I'll never be their ATM again.